2009.
I was ready.
They were still, I went to the
Standing guard.
You ready?
Okay.
Nobody wants to talk to me. They all
Senate will please come to order. We have up for consideration H 217. Third reading was ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a proposal, an amendment that's being passed out. Mr. President, this is a strike-all amendment, and as we know, it's been a long, winding road for child care in this session. We've been through a discussion of S56, which was the initial child care bill, and then more recently, we looked at a proposal amendment yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, Mr. President, where we looked at agreed to language that House Human Services and House Health and Welfare have worked on to understand our policy differences and come to some agreement on those policy differences. What you have before you today is a new proposal amendment. There are very few changes in this proposal for the policies that I presented yesterday on the floor of the Senate for H 217. The intent remains the same. It's important for us to increase access to and the quality of child care services, after school, summer school care throughout the state of Vermont. Increase equitable access to and quality of pre-kindergarten education for children 4 years of age. Provide financial stability to child care programs, stabilize Vermont's talented child care workforce, address the workforce needs of the state employers, and maintain a mixed delivery system for pre-K, child care, and after-school and summer care, and assign school districts with responsibility of ensuring equitable pre-kindergarten access for kids who are 4 years of age on the date by which this child's school district requires kindergarten students to have attained 5 years of age or who are not yet enrolled in kindergarten. We know how critically important child care is to our business economy, to people of the state. Families can't work unless they have child care, and kids thrive in a social environment that includes other children. Mr. President, I am not going to go through the entire proposal before you. I will say that there have been a couple of technical corrections to ensure that the payment to our child care homes and centers is clarified. One of the things that we did in the bill was to add an increased payment to all of our child care centers. We have what's known as the STARS program. And so centers used to be based on whether or not they accumulated 1 through 5 stars. The proposal in this bill, which is consistent with what both the Senate, the House, and the administration believes is appropriate, is to have all centers and child care homes paid at the 5-star level. So that's clarified in this bill. The other critical part, another technical correction, and something that has been agreed to by both the House and the Senate, is to stabilize the co-payment for families. So families will continue to have a $25 copay, and that will increase as the federal poverty level goes up for families. Those are the few policy technical corrections that we've made since yesterday. We've also added in the language in sections 2, section 3, and section 3A that the House Human Services and Senate Health and Welfare had concurred upon in our discussions over the past week. The most important thing that you have before you, Mr. President, is a funding source, how we are going to pay for childcare in this state. And it's quite a relief, I think, for many of us to be able to stand before you and present that information. I am not going to do that. I'm going to yield to the Chair of Senate Appropriations to speak, and as well as to the Chair of Senate Finance, to talk about and to present the funding process for child care in the state of Vermont. It does include a payroll tax, and I think that is a position that the Senate had supported in our parental leave program that was included in the bill S56 as it passed from the Senate to the other body. But this is a different payroll tax, and it is something that has been negotiated by our Finance and Appropriations Committee chairs. And so I will, at this time, Mr. President, I will yield to the Chair of Appropriations, and I am very happy to respond to questions as we go forward on what is before us in this proposal amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
The senator from Chittenden Southeast yields to the senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know from yesterday's amendment that we did to an unemployment and a workers' compensation bill was to really keep live our work on the Child Care Assistance Program that was passed in S56. In putting that strike all amendment together yesterday, we tried to incorporate the recommended changes that had been identified by the other body, but we still had one major point that had to be reconciled, and that would be the revenue source to support the cost of the program expansion and the increase in payments to our child care providers. As we know, the wage rates have been such that it's been hard to attract staff, qualified staff, and to make child care arrangements financially viable. What we have today is really an agreement that has been reached, and we were doing a strike call simply because it's easier to follow it as opposed to, so don't have the impression that there's a lot of changes here, because really they're not as many as one might think. The big important thing is that we have come to agreement that the funding source would be what the Senate passed, and that is a payroll tax. The other body was considering an income tax combined with an increase in corporate tax, but that is not going to move forward. So what we have what we have agreed to here is a bill, if we move it forward, is one that they can concur with. We are getting short of time, and so it's important that we move the bill as a strike all, because it does reflect the agreement. And the payroll tax has a couple of changes. I can let the chair of our Finance Committee go through them, and they're very minor. One, of course, is as the case in one of the calculations, it made a very minor difference in terms of the overall rate, and the other is how we treat self-employed. So it's with a great sigh of relief that we have reached this point where we have something that in fact has come to consensus, and I think that we can feel very relieved but also very proud in terms of the progress that we will have made relative to strengthening and expanding our child care program and the way in which we support working families in this state. So I'm going to yield to the Chair of Finance.
The senator from Caledonia yields to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Only those who have been involved in the negotiations know how hard fought this concession on the funding source has been. As of, I think, 7:30, 8 o'clock last night, we did not have agreement. And the other body has come around and has agreed to a payroll tax. We held tight to our position, that this was the appropriate tax. An income tax is broad-based. This is a narrow benefit. It benefits primarily employers and workers, and we stuck to the payroll tax. When we originally brought this to the floor, we were looking at 0.42%. Yesterday, it was 0.43. Today, it's 0.44, as just we refine the numbers and make numbers. Most of that, the other changes were when we looked at self-employed, we had originally proposed they be taxed at, the payroll tax is 25% employees. The lowest wage schedules, that's like a nickel a paycheck. It's pretty affordable, more affordable than childcare. But we had looked at self-employed and said, well, you're the employer, you're paying the 75%. As part of the agreement, the self-employed will be treated as an employee. That is, they will be paying in the 25% of the total. And in order to cover some of that increased cost, the other body, right now, we go up to, I think it's the Social Security cap. This just removes the cap. There's not that many dollars to be had, that many workers above the cap, but this says everybody is going to pay in. So those are the changes.
So the question is, Senator from Windham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to point out, as the reporter of the original bill, that the workers' compensation and the unemployment compensation start at Section 26, and our committee informally welcomes this amendment.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the senator from Chittenden Southeast and others? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to stand and offer my gratitude to the senators who are involved in the negotiations, the the chairs of the Health and Welfare Appropriations and Finance Committee. I know this was not easy. This bill was extremely important to so many people in our state and is a huge historic step forward in the way that we fund and support childcare and early childhood education in our state. And I also, and I know we don't usually do this, but I do want to thank the members of the negotiation team from the other body. I know it wasn't easy for them to give on a few things, and I think that we all did this with best intentions to make sure that we got something passed this session. So I'm really proud of our work today, and proud of what we're doing for the families and children of our state, and think that this is a great, great moment in this chamber. So thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the bill be amended? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to say a couple of words, first of which will be thanks to the extremely impressive chairs of the relevant committees in the Senate who made this happen. And that would be Senators Lyons, Kitchell, Cummings, Hardy, Rum, Hinsdale. It was a privilege to watch them work, and this historic work, which advances families as well as our economy, I think is almost entirely attributable to their perseverance. I do want to thank the leadership and the relevant chairs in the other body. As my colleague from Madison pointed out, it is never an easy thing when you have two highly intelligent teams working toward the same goal, stuck on one piece. And that's where we were for a while. I think everyone realized that this is that special issue that comes along only once every few years, where everyone has to recognize that everything must give before it. And transforming the childcare sector is exactly that sort of moment. So again, Mr. President, it's with gratitude to this chamber for sticking with this from day one to now, and gratitude for all involved, that I will with great, great pleasure vote for this strike law. Thank you.
The Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast and others? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast and others. Are there any other amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H217, an act relating to miscellaneous workers' compensation amendments.
Now the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question?
Roll call.
Roll call has been requested, Senator from Windsor. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collimore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Hewlett.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza.
Yes.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Pershing.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Pihosky.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Renner.
Yes.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 24. Those voting nay, 6. And you have passed H217. Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, I would ask that at this time the Senate suspend its rules and message the actions just taken on 217 to the House forthwith.
Now the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message your actions taken on H217 to the House forthwith. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to message your actions taken on H217 to the House forthwith. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this point, I would ask that we move to H470.
I believe you would need to
I'm sorry.
take a suspension request.
Absolutely. I would move that at this time, the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up H470 for immediate action pending entry on the notice calendar.
Now, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up for immediate action H470 pending entry on the notice calendar. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to take up H470. At the moment, H470 has been returned by the House with a proposal of amendment, and the pending question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? Senator from Windsor, if you'd care to.
Thank you, Mr. President. What you'll shortly see are the several amendments they have made to our miscellaneous bill on alcoholic beverage laws. And you'll be happy to know they made no additions, but they took some things out. And and I think for some good reasons, some thoughtful reasons. And given at the end of the year, that's great. They made 4 changes. The first 3 are in section 3, the 4th class license section. They removed the satellite tasting rooms altogether. and they took out the full pours and at those tasting rooms. That's the second change. And they removed the changes on the special events permits and asked for clarification. And on 2 of these permits, they are asking the Department of Liquor and Lottery to come back with really a more thoughtful way to integrate and streamline all these special event permits that we have. They want a more holistic approach to the permits for our cultural events, for our sampling events, for all the special events. And they want, they've taken the name change back in the 4th change in section 6. They've taken the name back to the original name, which, and they are asking for the DLL to come up with a holistic event permitting proposal. And so for all special service permits, we will have a more streamlined, holistic approach. And that is, I think, your Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs felt that this, we concur on a vote of 5-0, and we would ask the Senate to support these changes.
The question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on H470? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have concurred with the House proposal of amendment on H470. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, if I can make a combined motion, I would move that we suspend our rules to take up H471 and H480. H471 being an act relating to technical administrative changes to Vermont's tax laws, and H480 being an act relating to property valuation and reappraisals, and take them up for immediate action pending entry on the notice calendar.
Now, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules and take up for immediate consideration H471 and H480 pending entry on the notice calendar. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. 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 Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to take up H471 and 480. We now have on the calendar H471. 470 has been returned, is up for second reading. It is favorable to the proposal of amendment. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H471, an act relating to technical and administrative changes to Vermont's tax laws.
Now for the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the technical and administrative tax bill, formerly known as the miscellaneous tax bill, and it will always be the miscellaneous tax bill to me. I ask you, beg your indulgence. This, more so than most, has been a work in progress, and I think it was 3 minutes before we reconvened up here on the floor that the committee got the final version of this bill. And so as a result, I am working off of 2 separate side-by-sides and the bill. So what you have before you is a strike-all amendment for the bill that the amendments that originally appeared in the calendar, and that was necessary because we aren't allowed to amend amendments. So I will start at the easy part, at the beginning. And I did jinx this bill. I said it was probably the shortest, easiest, and least controversial bill, miscellaneous tax, we had done. And until yesterday it was. It is now, it is not probably the shortest, but not the longest. I believe it is still not controversial. So there's been a lot of changes, mostly as kind of mop-up, some of it after, as part of the concessions on the child care bill. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Section 1 and 2 are the sections that just link us to the federal income and estate tax sections. We do this every year. Sections 3 and 4 are companion pieces made necessary by the COVID advent of to-go cocktails. And if you remember during COVID, in order to try and help out our restaurants, we said, okay, I can call up and order a martini and I can go pick it up at the door. It has to be in a sealed container, but I can get my cocktail to go from my restaurant. This makes it clear that when a restaurant or operator with a liquor license, if I drink that cocktail on premises, I am subject to the meals and alcoholic beverage tax. If I pick it up and take it out and it's sealed and I'm taking it somewhere else to drink, it is subject to the sales tax. And these two sections make that change clear. Okay, section 5 is another housekeeping. It puts meals and rooms in the same class as sales tax. And actually, section 6 does the same thing. Right now, if you are charged a sales tax and you didn't owe it, it shouldn't be charged. Those are, I forget the term, but those taxes aren't paid by the shop owner or the restaurant. They collect those taxes as an agent of the state. The person that owes the taxes, the person that's buying something, the person that's getting the meal, the person that's paying the local option tax. Right now, if you request a refund on a sales tax, you have to demonstrate, if you're an operator, you have to demonstrate that you are returning that sales tax to the customer. You can't get it back and keep it. This says the same thing for local options and rooms and meals. And we think the next section is an addition, 6A, from your committee. We know of at least one instance in which a store was located, this was a village kind of town thing. It was located in the town, but had the same zip code as the village. The village had a local option tax. The town didn't. This was a national company. For some reason, the merchant had been charging his customers the 1% local option tax. Brought to their attention, they stopped doing it. But the question is, how does the person that has bought over a number of years a couple $100 worth of stuff there and has paid a tax on that know that they are entitled to a rebate? Because the store owner can only report that if he's shown that he is actually returning it. So this is a study from the tax department saying what would be the best way, and then you get into tax information is confidential. What would be the best way to let consumers know that they might be entitled to a tax rebate? Section 6B, you've seen before. This is the sales tax exemption on advanced wood boilers. We put it in yesterday. The Ag Committee put it in. This is belts and suspenders. They're the exact same bill, so if they all pass, there's no problem. Section 7 repeals the CAP-TAP program and the fees that were assessed as part of it. CapTap is no longer being used. That was the computer program that was used to help towns compute their property tax. I'm really feeling a sense of loss since the city of Montpelier was the first one to use the CapTap program. We found all the bugs in the program, and as a consequence, I did lots of property tax appeals. I think there were over 300. So I'm going to miss it. Section 8, repeal, okay, this repeals the requirement that the Director of Property Valuation Review establish and maintain a central file of duplicate municipal grand lists at PBR. You're going to see a couple of these things which are just bringing us into the modern era. You don't need to have a paper copy sitting there to access the information. Section 9 removes the requirement of a for current use that you send a letter. It allows for other means, i.e. emails, probably, or whatever comes in the future, to tell people they're no longer eligible, they have taken it out and they owe a tax, a use, and municipalities will no longer receive a list of current use properties in the municipality by mail. We can email that to them. Section 10. This follows last year's property tax exemption for Native American, Indigenous American tribes recognized by the state of Vermont. We exempted them from property tax. And also there's some not-for-profits that work for the benefit of the tribes exclusively. It's a very small amount. What this says, if they happen to own some land in current use, they also don't have to pay the use change tax if they take the land out of current use. Okay, now I'm flipping here between, I think I'm still good. Okay. Okay, yes. Section 11, and we have an amendment on this one that clarifies the original. This makes it clear, right, if a not-for-profit, and there's all kinds of requirements, like they own 50% of the membership is the same. If a not-for-profit transfers property to another not-for-profit, and the image we kind of worked with, like there's United Way of Vermont and there's United Way of Barre and United Way of Montpelier, and Barre and Montpelier joined or transferred property. This bill would say that they did not owe the property transfer tax. Okay, then if this new group transfers property to United Way of Vermont, that third transfer would not be taxable if it were done, and this is and we were working to make it clear, if it were done within 3 years of the first transfer, and it was the tax commissioner determines that a major reason for that transfer was not to avoid taxes. And the word major is very important because 3 other places in the statute we talk about the major reason for doing this. If you transfer to a for-profit, or if the commissioner determines that this has been done to avoid taxes, major, then you owe the property transfer and the clean water surcharge on both the first and the second transfer. So there's a difference between, you got a couple of not-for-profit camps on a way, on a lakefront, and they kind of merge. Those mergers are fine, But if they then sell to Hotels International, who puts up a major condominium in that spot, then you owe the tax. And this brings not-for-profit transfers in line with what is allowed to corporations when they do some reorganization. And so if corporations reorganize and there's some property transfer in between different departments, this allows that same privilege to go to the not-for-profits. Section 12, and this is where we're going to start getting into changes. Section 12 makes it clear that the child and dependent care tax credit, and that is the Vermont tax credit that goes on Vermont state income tax that mirrors the federal tax credit. It's not our child tax credit, it's the child and dependent care. It makes it clear that the dependent or child does not have to be receiving care in Vermont. And so if you are paying for your mother's nursing home in New Hampshire, or your child is going to child care in New York because that's the nearest one, you still qualify for the tax credit. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm still good on these. Okay, now we're into what the Senate has added. These are new. Okay, this states that when there's an EITC claim for somebody who's a part or full-time resident in the state, it's a partial claim, that it is based on your income instead of your earned income. So it's your total income, not if you just happen to have a part-time job and you earned a little bit, but you happen to have a very good trust fund. It's based on your total income, not just on your earned income. Let's see. Okay, the next two sections, 12B and C, are changes that are necessary by reality. This has to do with S corporations and limited liability companies in which one or more members are located out of state, businesses here. The law says that when we're assessing taxes, we have to assess them at the middle tax rate. The problem is, I believe it was 2018 that we rewrote the tax code and collapsed the top two rates, and there's only 4. So what's the middle rate? This makes it clear that it is the second highest tax rate, which is relatively equivalent to when we collapse the top 2 tax rates. Okay. All right. Yes, and we had added in here the SALT tax deduction, the workaround for state and local taxes. At the request, that has been struck. The other body felt that they really hadn't had time to work on it. I will say this was extremely contentious in my committee, but in the end, in hoping to get this out, we did concur. Okay. Section 13 allows the Vermont Housing Financing Agency to renew certificates of exemption for qualified rent-restricted residential rental units every 10 years. The law as it stands says it can renew it once, after 10 years. They have a few of these rent-restricted houses. Whatever this is, it gives those landlords, those owners of those rental units, some benefit on your property tax in recognition of the fact that you are renting below market rate. And they would like to see that continue. Okay, section 14 has been struck. That required that there be a plain notice put in the envelope of your tax bill explaining the property tax credit system. The clerks were upset because it also said you had to do that even if it didn't fit in the envelope. You had to get bigger envelopes. The tax department says, we already put this on the bill backer, and we promise we will do this in plain English and nice large print, and we don't need to do this. So that one is out. Okay, I think I'm still working in the right order. I may get these out of order. Section 15 extends right now. If you don't file your homestead exemption by October 15th, you don't get it. The consumer advocate in the tax department has asked us to extend that to March 15th of the following year. He said that there's just enough cases where, for any one of 100 reasons, people miss that deadline. And we changed that deadline numerous times in this body because someone would come to us with one of those just, you know, family dying in the hospital, didn't realize, all those kinds of reasons. But it got to be, we moved it so many times, nobody really knew what the deadline was, so we set it. What this would allow is that if you miss it, you can come in until the following March 15th and put in your claim. You will be charged a $150 late filing fee, and the credits will be issued directly to the taxpayer so that the municipalities won't be required to alter anything or, you know, issue a check. It will come from the tax department. Okay. All right, I am now becoming confused. 12F. Okay. 13. I've got okay. 16, which would allow, okay, these are new. 16, 17, and 18 are new. And this was part of the request from the other body. The first thing, it would allow individuals without a tax ID number. You can have a tax ID number, you can have a social security number in order to qualify for anything. And we worked with this during COVID, trying to get Medicare benefits to our migrant workers. Their employers, most of them, if they're doing what they're supposed to, are deducting payroll taxes from their wages, but they don't get to benefit from any of those taxes, from any of the programs that those wages pay for. So this would allow them, if they don't have a tax ID number, requires the commissioner to set up a program that would allow them to qualify for Vermont's Earned Income Tax Credit and the Vermont Child Tax Credit. Yeah, and that's 16, 17, and 18. Okay, and then 18 is the next credit change. 18, if you remember when we did the child tax credit last year, there was a great desire, rather than just give, you know, a lower income family a big lump sum of money in January or April, that it would be more beneficial for them if they just got money year round. The problem with that was if they got money year round, for many of them, it might throw them off their SNAP benefits. It might, you know, there were other benefits that they would lose, and in the end, because we gave them a tax credit, they might fall over the child care cliff that we presently have. They would, in fact, lose money. This says that they will be paid quarterly, contingent on the federal government passing a law that won't make them lose their benefits, that this would not be counted. So that's just having that in place, but it is important to the other body. Okay, now I did 12B. Okay, we're now on 25, I think. I don't think I've missed anything. 25, okay, 25 is a study done by the Joint Fiscal Office on public infrastructure improvements. We've gotten a lot of requests. You may have heard about mini TIFs, towns that need some help to do basic infrastructure improvements, usually water and sewer improvements, in order to get some development, some housing, some things in town. And it's been kind of different proposals have come up. This is a study that would bring back information to us with suggestions as to how we might deal with that need and what would be the best way. Okay, yes, now we're on to TIFs, and we did add these. The Barry TIF bill, which was I believe, 23, came back to us very well decorated. It had a lot of veggie changes, it had TIF changes, but several of those TIF changes we have passed in this body at least 3 times. So we got this 2 days ago. We really haven't had time to go through all the veggie and the TIF changes, but we put the ones that we have voted for 3 times on this bill. And then there is an additional one we didn't add, but was brought to our attention by the other body, that they would like it, and we have passed it on more than one occasion, that will go on. So the first one is debt service, the definition of improvement. Most of these came out of the auditor's critique of the St. Albans TIF. And one of the things that towns standardly do, especially if you're dealing with a revenue fund, is you let a bond and then you use the revenue of that bond to pay, it's usually the interest only, on that bond until you get the revenue coming in, because you got to build something in a TIF before the revenue starts coming in. So you put the sewer line in, but it takes a while. This just makes it clear that yes, that is a legitimate use of bond revenue. You can pay that debt service for up to 2 years without it. Section 27 just says you can't make adjustments to a TIF district. Once you've set it, it's set. Section 28. It says tax increments, but it's really about decrements. And this has been pretty standard in our thing, is you set up a TIF district and you tear something down and you've got a big hole in the ground or 3 buildings burned down. You still owe the state the taxes that were due when you set up the background taxes that were due, the original taxes that were due when you set up the TIF district. That if, you know, that you're responsible for what happens within there, but that the payment to the Ed Fund, which is the payment that you were making when the TIF district was set with background growth, that you still owe that no matter what happens. Okay, I think I'm on 29 here. 29 is the Barry City TIF, which we did. 30 is the Town of Hartford TIF extension, which we did. 31 extends in the original bill that was voted out of finance. The Vermont Economic Progress Council, BEPC, is set to expire on January 1st, 2024. We had extended that sunset for 3 years. We know there's some concerns about BEPC and we, feel a need to work on those. But we thought we needed some time. But apparently both committees of jurisdiction and the other body feel very strongly that they only want to do a 1-year extension. And so this gives us a 1-year extension. Okay, I think that's what we're getting. Okay, then there are all the workers' compensation must-dos that were put into this bill because we weren't sure what was going to happen to workers' comp bill once we put childcare on it. They're still here, but the workers' comp bill looks healthier than it did 2 days ago. There's no changes, so again, this is belts and suspenders. We don't need to worry too much about that. And I know I have missed, I think I've missed a couple. The other things that went in here, and I am not seeing the sections because they're brand new. The other things that went in, the SALT workaround is out. The EITC and the child care are in. Tax stabilization is in. That basically says you've got a TIF district. If the town makes a tax agreement with a business they want to have come in, you can do whatever you want with the town's section part of the property tax, but you still owe the state the full amount because you can't negotiate or give away state tax revenue. The other ones in here is there was some reference to a TIF emergency. None of us had ever heard of it. The House had it in their bill and they wanted it in this bill so it could be struck. So we put it in this bill and it is struck. I think that is all the, I think that's all of it. Did I miss something? I did. Can I have a 30-second recess to figure out what I missed?
We'll declare a brief recess, we'll follow the gavel.
And you can have it in pill form or you can put it in like a tea.
We said 30 seconds, we meant it. Senator, please come to order.
30 seconds, that was quick.
Senator, will please come to order. Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I knew I'd missed something, and I'm sure the senator from Addison would have reminded me because she's been watching this. In here is a request from the bond bank. And the bond bank right now does bonds. But they are getting federal money that can be used for, and I'm looking for where it is. They're getting federal money, and they would like to be able to use different loan structures other than bonds to give it out. And this would be energy efficiency kinds of services. And so this allows them to do other services to municipalities, perhaps short-term loans, longer-term loans, but it will get money out and you don't have all the complications of a 20-year bond. So it gives them more flexibility to deal with what looks like a fair amount of federal money coming in. And it also changes their name from the Municipal Bond Bank to the Vermont Bond Bank. The vote in committee on all of this was 5-0, and we asked this body to concur.
Question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? Look at that. My apologies. Shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Finance? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was one of the two on the other side of the number that was just reported by the senator from Washington. I will vote for the bill, and I will vote positively for the bill because there's some things in it that we have to do. My no vote, and I believe I may speak for one other member of the committee at the same time, was our concern over what happened with the elimination of SALT and the insistence by the other body to remove it. And that was our concern. For those of you who perhaps were not here or don't remember it, SALT stands for state and local taxes. And a couple of years ago, the Trump administration proposed something that would eliminate on a federal level the ability of taxpayers to deduct the certain amounts of their state and local taxes. This was a very carefully crafted proposal, the net effect of which was to punish blue states, because it's blue states that typically have high state and local taxes. And the taxpayers in those states are the ones who paid this tax, and it definitely affected Vermont. A workaround was discovered by one or more states a couple of years ago, and the workaround has now been approved by the Internal Revenue Service as being valid. And the way the workaround worked is that if you had a pass-through entity, in other words, if you had a multi-member LLC or a partnership or an S corporation, you could deduct the federal tax. The federal tax is beneficial to Vermonters because any of those people who have those kinds of businesses have paid the tax to the federal government. And so what our workaround did at our application of it, and that the one that's been approved by other states, is we allow those taxpayers to get that federal income tax back from the federal government. It has no tax impact in Vermont at all. Doesn't cost us a dime, and in fact, we made money on it in this. The money that we made was we were going to give the money back or allow the taxpayer in Vermont to deduct 90% of it. So the 10% would go to us. We'd get about, I think, $1.75 million back to the state in free money. And the taxpayers would get maybe $20 million back. And this SALT limitation on the federal, from the federal taxes goes until I believe it sunsets in, I think it's 2027, in very few years, maybe a little sooner than that. The House indicated, the other body indicated that they would not concur with that deduction because they hadn't had time to look at it. But then they went on to say, well, because we're concerned that this gives money back to the wealthy and gives nothing to the poor. And I heard that, and frankly, my blood boiled, because this is money that belongs to Vermont taxpayers, a lot of whom are small businesses who paid this money out and had been able to deduct it before this punitive measure was enacted by the federal government, and it costs Vermont and Vermonters nothing, and in fact, it makes Vermonters money. And that's why I was concerned, and that's why I voted no on this amendment. But I will support the bill because the bill is needed. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two things. The former senator from Chittenden would be so sad to hear that this is out of the bill.
Yeah.
He argued for it so much last session, and I was not convinced, and he and I had many conversations about it, but I was convinced earlier this session when it was in the bill to begin with, when we sent it to the other body. So I definitely agree with the senator from Franklin about these concerns, and I was surprised to see it taken out. So if the former senator from Chittenden is listening, I am convinced and sad it didn't make it into this bill. I also just want to thank the chair of finance for the language on the bond bank that I asked about a couple times and kept hounding her in the hallway. And I'm glad it's in this bill. I got a call from the executive director of the bond bank asking for this language because of the money that's coming to the state from the Inflation Reduction Act, that a lot of which can be used for climate mitigation purposes for public buildings, for libraries, school districts, and municipalities. So this is federal money that can be used for weatherization, that can be used for energy efficiency, and can be used for a lot of the things that we're working really hard to do in our state. And this seemed like an easy fix. They need to get the money out quickly, and I think a lot of our communities will benefit from this. And the fix was really easy to change the language so the bond bank could get it out quicker. So I appreciate the work of the Senate Finance Committee, and I'm excited to vote for this bill. Thank you.
Getting a little tired up here as well, I apologize. I believe the question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Finance? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Finance. Question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H4 71. You have ordered third reading of H4 71. My apologies. We now have, I believe, H4 80 based on the prior vote.
Mr. President, if I might, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules and move H4 71 through all remaining stages of passage.
See if I can get this right. The senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules and place H4 71 through all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have placed H4 71 through all remaining stages of passage. Question before third reading, are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H4 71, an act relating to technical and administrative changes to Vermont's tax laws.
Now the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H4 71. We now have up for consideration H4 80. 480 was read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Government Operations, which considered the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommends that when the bill is further amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that when the bill as amended is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H480, an act relating to property valuation and reappraisals.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee of Government Operations, Senator from Addison, Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one of those bills that you may have heard a lot about based on how it left the other body. And so there were a lot of people in our communities that were very concerned about what this bill would do. And I just want to reassure you that when the bill came to the Senate Government Operations Committee, we made substantial changes to the bill. And I think that most of your communities and the listers and appraisers and select board chairs in your communities should be happy with where the bill is, especially compared to when it left the other body. The other body was, to be fair, being very ambitious to try to solve a problem that needs to be solved. And they did it in a very smart way, but they maybe did it a little too fast. So what we did in Senate Government Operations was to really slow down the train a bit. And this is a bill about property valuation and reappraisals. As many of you know, the past few years, we have seen significant changes in the value of property in our state with the impact of COVID, the impact of people moving in and buying second homes, the impact of the economic changes that have come as a result of the pandemic, has exacerbated problems that were already there. In that there were a lot of towns that needed their property reappraised and hadn't done so in a long time, and they weren't able to find property reappraisal firms to do the work of the reappraising, and our local listers and assessors were not able to keep up, or in some cases didn't have the expertise to do some of the complex work that needed to be done. So that's what the problem the bill is trying to solve. I'm going to just take through a high level. It's technical, and I know that we're tired, and we just heard a technical tax bill, so I'm going to try to take it through on a higher level, and if you have more detailed questions, I'm happy to answer them. But the first thing that the bill does is it removes the trigger of the common level of appraisal for requiring a property value reappraisal, a municipal reappraisal of properties. Right now, if the common level of appraisal, which is the mechanism that we use in order to ensure equitable tax rates across our state and to fund education in our state. Right now, under current law, if the common level of appraisal falls below 85% or rises above 115%, bless you, then there's a trigger that requires the town to reappraise. The director of property valuation at the Department of Tax will require a town to reappraise. And if they don't, they can be subject to some penalties, withholding of state funds and other things that really sort of, it's what the senator from Lamoille calls the big stick. Okay, so this bill removes the big stick. And that, I think, is a really important message to give to all of your constituents. This bill breaks that stick, no longer there. It does retain a smaller stick. So there's another thing that requires a reappraisal, and that is what's called the coefficient of dispersion. And that is a comparison of property values within a municipality. So if this property over here and this property over here have a wide range in what their reappraisal is, it means that there's something funky going on in the town, that some properties are very undervalued or some are very overvalued, and the coefficient of dispersion is used to measure that in an equalization study of the town. And if the COD gets to be bigger than 20, then the town will have to also reappraise. So that's the littler stick. It happens less frequently than the CLA trigger. That little stick is retained. Okay, so big stick gone, little stick still there. That's the basics of what the first thing that the bill does. The second thing that the bill does is it puts our properties on a schedule, our towns on a schedule that's developed by the Department of Taxes for reappraising our municipalities. And the best practices nationally and even internationally are that municipalities should reappraise their properties every 6 years. So right now there's a trigger, or sometimes towns say, oh, we really need to do it because we haven't done it in a really long time and we think our values are out of date. So the stick is gone, and some towns are waiting too long to reappraise. We just saw last year the most sort of biggest example was, or the most press-worthy example was the city of Burlington, which hadn't reappraised in 15 years. And when they did reappraise, it really created a lot of waves in the change in the valuation of their properties, both in their commercial properties and in their residential properties. And we saw big swings in their tax rates because it had been so long since they reappraised. So this would require the Department of Taxes to create a 6-year schedule. And the properties that would be the first up would be basically the ones that are most in need of being reappraised. Either they have been triggered by the CLA changes or the COD changes, or that they've had a really long time since they've been reappraised, or the director of property valuation thinks that they are an urgent case. So they would start this schedule. The schedule would take effect starting in 2025 for reappraisals that were finished by 2027. So those are the things that the bill actually implements. As the bill came to us from the House, it had a trigger, it had a sort of foregone conclusion that the state should take over reappraisals, and that the State Department of Taxes would create essentially a division of reappraisals, and the state would do it. And it asked the Department of Taxes to implement a plan to have the state take over. That does not happen in the Senate version of the bill. The Senate Government Operations took that out. So now what it does is, and this is sort of a theme of the session, I think, it actually has them study whether or not it makes sense to do that. And it asks them to come up with a proposal for, if you were to do it, how might it work? And so that's the other thing you'll see in the bill. And that starts in section 8 of the bill. The first thing that they do is they come back to us December 15th of 2023, requires the Department of Taxes to submit a progress report to the relevant committees on the first 6 months of work, for a report that the full report of which is required a year later in 2024. An implementation proposal to create a statewide reappraisal system, including a preliminary schedule to phase in full reappraisals for each municipality every 6 years, with the first municipality scheduled to complete reappraisals on or before April 1st, 2027. That's the first thing. They come back with what their schedule is, what their proposed schedule is for reappraisals. And one thing I didn't mention, the big stick is removed retroactively back to April 1st of 2022. So your towns that are streaming right now, you can tell them retroactive to 2022, the CLA big stick is removed, okay? Then the second thing they have to report on is recommendations for obtaining data on properties throughout Vermont in order to identify and differentiate between property types and characteristics, including use, occupancy, or vacancy, square footage, and any other relevant factors. For those of us who've been involved in trying to make tax policy for the past couple of years, or trying to make housing policy for the past couple of years, we all know we don't have sufficient data for it. So we can maybe propose something in the tax department, or ACCD will come back and be like, we don't have the data for that. We just don't know what it is. So a lot of what this bill is doing is asking for the data and asking for a proposal for how do we figure out what types of properties we have and what characteristics of properties we have. And then we can determine how likely to use that data, and other policymakers and the agencies themselves can determine how they can successfully use that data. The other thing they have to come back and report to us in this interim report is options for and any implementation of implicit bias reduction training for listers and assessors. we got some testimony, as did the House, about the bias that might be involved in appraising properties or reappraising properties. And sometimes that bias is based on where the property is. Sometimes that property is based on what the property is being used for. And sometimes that property is based on who owns that property, whether it's based on race or gender, or whether somebody's out of state or in-state owner, et cetera. So really, we're trying to get at how do we reduce bias and how do we include that in the training for listers and assessors. So then the next report is due a year later. So if the first report comes in, we may want to act on some things next session. Sorry, and or not. But then there's a next report on December 15th, 2024 that requires the Department of Taxes, in consultation with a lot of stakeholders, to implement a proposal on implementation proposal to create a statewide tax reappraisal system. It's just a proposal. It does not implement it. Nothing would happen unless we do something. And then an expanded list of data required to be reported, recommendations to distinguish between different types and uses of properties, and a detailed proposal to integrate those recommended types into grand lists and the overall property tax system. An expanded list of data required to be reported, and recommended means to achieve consistency in property valuation and taxation across Vermont to prioritize the elimination of racial, socioeconomic, and other implicit biases. And it requires a review and a revision of state assessment guidance and training provided to listers and assessors to reduce implicit bias. We actually got testimony on what is in the handbook that is provided from the department to listers and assessors. And within that handbook, they are literally training listers and assessors to be biased. And so when we saw that, we said, oh, wait, we need you to look at that and really update it so that there's not bias right in your training materials. It also makes changes to the education. It requires the director of PBR to include in certified assessment education programs for municipal listers and assessors education on racial disparities in property valuation outcomes and ongoing bias training, and makes other improvements and expansions to the types of property, to the types of training that listers and assessors get. And it requires that elected listers meet the same qualifications and training requirements for hired assessors. And it allows elected listers who do not meet the training requirements some time after they're elected to comply with the training requirements. It also requires that select boards notify the property valuation division of property valuation within 14 days of a vote to eliminate the office of the lister and employ or contract a professionally qualified assessor who is required to meet qualifications and training, and expands the authority for municipalities to hold a vote to eliminate the lister to special meetings. A lot of towns have elected lister positions that they can't get anyone to run for. So this allows the towns more flexibility in removing those positions and then hiring assessors. So that is the bulk of what is in the bill. There are tweaks to the training requirements, and really the main thing it does is remove the big stick, keep the little stick, and put towns on a schedule. And one of the benefits of the schedule that we heard is that if towns that are like towns or near towns, so say they might want to reappraise all the towns in the southern portion of Addison County, just pick my own county. That might be a job that a firm would want to take because it would be a lot of towns that are right next to each other, rather than saying, well, we're just going to come and reappraise the property in Whiting, which is a really small town and may not be worth it for the firm to take on the reappraisal for just Whiting. So part of the plan for creating a schedule is to make it more beneficial and easier for towns to get reappraisal firms to come in and do the work. So Mr. President, that is the bulk of the bill. A lot of it is data collection, but there are some things that will help immediately with the crisis that some of our towns are in. So we heard from a lot of witnesses. Of course, the Department of Taxes, who is very supportive of this version of the bill. As I said to the Appropriations Committee, the Deputy Commissioner of Taxes was almost gleeful when talking about the bill and how excited she is to do this work. So I would say they're very supportive of this bill. The VLCT is also, and we heard from them, of course, the Office of Racial Equity. We heard from a lot of select boards and local listers and assessors themselves from many of your communities around the state. We heard from, of course, Joint Fiscal Office and Legislative Council. We heard from the Vermont Assessors and Listers Association, and they are cautiously, they're not fully into it, but they're cautious about it. But we did hear from them repeated times, and I think that they will appreciate the added attention to training and data collection. The vote in committee was 5-1-0, and we ask for the support of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Bill is then referred to Committee on Finance for the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the flurry of the hopefully second to last day, I am not as prepared as I would hope to have been. I forgot my witness list, but your Senate Finance Committee did hear from a witness from NEMREC, and if I had access to the World Wide Web of Information, I could have looked up that acronym, but I also am short of that as well. If somebody would like to know it, I'd be happy to Google it with a recess. But so a gentleman, Ernie Saunders, the CEO from NEMREC, did give us some additional perspective on, and that's what you'll see in the Senate Finance Amendment. Really two instances of amendment. The first one is just getting consistency. They want the words to be consistent through it, so they found that plan is not consistent with previous sections, so they're proposing to change that to the word proposal. And the second one is from that testimony of a gentleman named Ernie Saunders from NEMREC. He just encouraged us to broaden the scope of that study to also consider recommendations for changing the annual date by which grand lists are required to be lodged from April 1st to January 1st or another date. In his work with town appraisers and towns, that date always seems to have made more sense, so they just want that to be included in the considerations of the study. With that amendment, your Senate Finance Committee voted 6-0-1, Mr. President. We urge this Senate to concur.
Bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, and for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Appropriations reviewed H480 for appropriations. And the main one is the $50,000 to the Department of Taxes that they're going to use to hire a consultant to help them with the implementation proposal and report that they have to do in Section 4. There's also $100,000 in here from the Ed Fund to property valuation to do training for the listers and assessors, and we find those acceptable, so we voted the bill out favorably on a vote of 7-0-0.
I've heard the report of the Committee on Appropriations. The first vote will be shall the report of the Committee on Government Operations be amended as offered by the Committee on Finance. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have amended the report of the Committee on Government Operations as offered by the Committee on Finance. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Government Operations as amended? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. With due apology, since this was pulled off the notice calendar, and I at least like to try my best to let reporters know that I might be having questions ahead of time. So I haven't done that, but I would like to interrogate the reporter of the bill.
Senator from Addison is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
So, Mr. President, I'm just kind of curious, and forgive me, I don't remember the person's name, but there was a lister from my county who was rather persistently sending emails with concerns about local control being taken away. And I don't want you to have to sort of characterize her situation at this point, but would you say, because you made a comment on the report, that you felt that you had allayed some of the concerns of some of the listers in terms of the local control being taken away? And I'm wondering if you could just speak to that a bit.
Yes, in fact, the lister that you mentioned from your district, Mr. President, is the president of the Vermont Association of Listers and Assessors, if I'm thinking of the same person. And like I said, they are not excited about the bill, like the tax department is literally excited about it, but I think that they feel like it's a huge improvement over the House version of the bill. It doesn't take away local control. The local municipalities are still retain the requirement and the duty, and that they still do all the reappraisals in this bill. It's really just a study of how could we do it differently, and also how can we collect better data, and how can we do better training for listers and assessors and appraisers. So I would not characterize her as fully supportive of the bill, but I would say that she is far more supportive of this version of the bill than the House version of the bill, which did take the reappraisal system and move it from the state level to this, from the local level to the state level.
I thank the reporter. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Government Operations as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Government Operations as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered third reading of H480. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take 480 through all remaining stages of passage.
Now, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to place H480 through all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to place H480 through all remaining stages of passage. Third reading of H480 has been ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H480, an act relating to property valuation and reappraisals.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed H480. That completes the orders of the day. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message the actions taken during the session on S-138, an act relating to school safety, H-470, an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to alcohol beverage laws, H-471, an act relating to technical and administrative changes to Vermont's tax laws, H-480, an act relating to property valuation and reappraisals, and H-493, an act relating to capital construction and state bonding.
Now, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message their actions taken on the following bills to the House forthwith: S-138, H-470, H-471, H-480, and H-493. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have messaged your action on those 5 bills to the House forthwith. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I would move that the Senate stand in adjournment until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Friday, the 12th. And if I might begin the announcements.
You may.
You have heard the drums. That is the corporate cup race. And I have good news and bad news. Bad news is that State Street is now closed, so you will not be able to use that if you are driving, although you can still use it if you're on foot. At 6 o'clock, the side streets will close. So you have half an hour if you need to get out to use the side streets and not State Street to get out of the complex. So with that said, Mr. President, I just wanted to thank the body for a long, productive day, and I will leave it at that.
Now, Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that pending announcements, the Senate stand adjourned until Friday at 10 a.m. Are there any announcements, Senator from Madison?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Government Operations will meet tomorrow at 8:30. We have one more town charter to get out. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Senator from Windsor.
The other piece of good news is that we have so many fit legislative council members and committee members that we have a number of teams running in this race. So if you're hemmed in, go cheer them on, because they are out there putting us all to shame in terms of being in incredible shape. So it's very impressive. If members of the Senate Economic Development would like to stay, one of our legislative council members who's not running, he's willing to work with us going through S100 for preparing for tomorrow.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you. May I inquire of the, I think, Pro Tem?
The senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated if he so chooses.
I wonder if we might need a rules committee meeting quickly to, I don't know if we received the bill to get the charter out that we need to pass, or if we can have one tomorrow morning.
Sorry?
We'll take a 3.5 second recess.
Okay.
Addison has the floor and is interrogating the senator from Chittenden Central.
And if I might, Mr. President, I believe we've figured out how to do this in the morning rather than now when we're all looking to go.
Thank you.
Are there any other announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. If not, please say nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand adjourned until tomorrow at 10 o'clock.